We're just going to take a slight side turning here and look at another aspect of property as well, and that is green homes. You may be aware that after only a few months, the government has scrapped its Green Homes grant, which was designed to encourage people to make their homes more environmentally friendly. And indeed, there is a big push for all new builds to be environmentally friendly, properly insulated. We were talking the other week about the possibility of having an electric boiler instead of a gas boiler. That may well be compulsory at some point. We're going to find out more about Green Homes grants now with Patrick Hall, who's a senior researcher at the Bright Blue think tank. He's been looking into this. Patrick, good morning to you.
Morning, Clive.
Green Home grants then, is it a mistake, do you think, to have scrapped them?
Well, I think the scheme wasn't working the way that it was currently set up, so something needed to change. I do think it's a mistake to do away with a home improvement scheme entirely and not have anything in its place. It's certainly going to be a real challenge for the government to decarbonise the existing housing stock if it wants to achieve its net zero 2050 target. Housing is responsible for a fifth of our emissions, so it does strike me as quite odd that the government has scrapped the scheme with no replacement.
What was the scheme doing? I think a lot of people might be surprised there even was one. What improvements were they funding or helping to fund?
So the scheme funded two types of improvements: insulation and low carbon heating technology. So insulation, typically in your walls, a solid wall insulation, a cavity wall insulation, and then low carbon heating technologies such as solar panels or heat pumps.
And they say, as I understand it, that they've scrapped it because people weren't really taking advantage of it and not that much was being done under the scheme.
Well, certainly not much was being done under the scheme. I think there's a few reasons for why it hasn't been successful. There's certainly no debate that it has been a failure. It's only achieved 10% of its target to retrofit 600,000 homes in 6 months. But I think there's a few reasons for that beyond low take-up. One is that the scheme itself is very confusing in the way that it's designed. So they have what's called primary and secondary measures, and in order to install a secondary measure, you have to install a primary measure first. So, for example, primary measure is a heat pump, a secondary measure is double glazing. So somebody might come along, get a grant under the Green Homes grant and say, I want to put double glazing into my house, and then find out that they can't actually do that because they have to install a heat pump first, and they may not want to do that.
Right,
so it's confusing, it's poorly administered
I'm getting confused already.
It's poorly administered as well. I mean, there was lots of reports of people not receiving their vouchers, installers not receiving payments once they've been redeemed, and there was a real difficulty as well for people to actually find installers to carry out those retrofits in the first place.
How important is it that this stuff happens? I mean, are our homes in the UK, are they efficient? How do we compare?
No, actually, homes in the UK are some of the most poorly insulated in Europe, certainly falling behind Scandinavian countries, Germany, France, and the Benelux countries. There's actually 19 million homes that fall below the EPC rating of C. That's an Energy Performance Certificate rating. And that ranges from A to G. And what that tells you is essentially how energy efficient your home is. So, as I said, 19 million homes currently fall below the rating of C. The Committee on Climate Change has recommended that all homes be at or above that rating of C in the next 10 to 15 years if we want to be on track to meet our net zero emissions by 2050 target. So there's a long way to go.
We were talking a couple of weeks ago on the programme about gas boilers versus electricity, and there was some sort of measures been mooted at least that all new builds would have to have electric boilers. Is that the way forward, do you think?
I think that when it comes to home heatings, I don't think it's right to peg ourselves to one specific technology. I think that there's going to be a range of different home heating measures. So, for example, at the moment, hydrogen in the pipeline is something which is being discussed amongst policymakers. How can we scale that up to heat homes, particularly in northern parts of the country? Heat pumps as well, I think, are going to play a significant role, provided that they're coupled with good insulation in properties too. So I think there's a range of technologies that can be used. The real challenge isn't so much for the future home stock, but the existing housing stock and how we decarbonise that.
Yes, so presumably gas boilers are a bit of a no-no, are they? Old-fashioned ones, at least.
Well, there has been some people mooting policy, for example, to ban fossil fuel heating systems by a certain date, say, for example, 2030. And that policy really is born out of the government's decision to ban fossil fuel vehicles by 2030. It's taking the same principle, which is a product ban, really, and then applying it to home heatings. I mean, it's been very successful for electric vehicles. We've seen a number of manufacturers come out and say that they're going to shift their production lines to all electric by the 2030 date. So taking a policy with a similar principle and applying it to home heating may be one way to address that.
And there was a lot of talk, particularly at the start of the pandemic, about how we should seize this opportunity, that we could have some kind of new economy driven by green measures. This seems to be going in the opposite direction.
Well, exactly, Clive. It is odd, I mean, for that reason alone, but also this is the year of COP26. This is the year of the major climate change conference in Glasgow, and here we are doing away with our flagship home improvement scheme. I think where the government has dropped the ball on this as well is that the Green Homes Grant was not only seen as an opportunity to decarbonise the housing stock, but it was also seen as an opportunity to provide jobs in a time of great economic uncertainty. So it was really marrying those agendas of net zero, but also levelling up. But the way that the government has rolled out the scheme and those failures that I alluded to before has meant that businesses have lacked the confidence around the longevity of the scheme. And what it's meant is that they're not prepared to go ahead and invest in the labour, training and certification to ramp up their supply chain to be able to deliver these types of home improvements. So it has failed in that sense.
Are you hopeful there might be some sort of replacement scheme?
I think the government will have to introduce some form of replacement scheme, and we're likely to learn more about that in the heat and building strategy, which is due imminently. There has been discussions about whether policy will be delivered at a local government level rather than a central government level, but we'll just have to wait and see what's detailed in that strategy when it's released.
That's Patrick Hall from the Bright Blue think tank talking about the Green Homes Grants.